The history of heavy.
Hello and welcome. I almost said to the Huntsman Hopolanco podcast, to the History of Heavy podcast, episode 34. Happy to be with you all tonight. Thank you for listening. I am Michael Huntsman, currently sitting in Sebastopol, California, in Anne Frank's basement, and that is Big Daddy Dave Lieberman in San Francisco, California. Hello, Dave.
Well, hello there, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Good,
Been
man.
doing well lately. Yeah,
Good.
things are going.
I keep joking about this weird room I'm in, and maybe Anne Frank's basement isn't the right way. It was really actually an attic, I guess,
An attic,
not
yeah.
a basement. But I don't have a better way to describe it, and I sort of hate the way this background looks, and I haven't fixed it yet for the YouTubers out there. But I will at some point. We're only 34 episodes in, so give me some breathing room.
We got a long runway still, my friend.
We do, because we are only in 1971, my friend. And the goal of this podcast, which chronicles the history of heavy music across genre, song by song, is to get to present day heavy, to talk about the blood incantations of the world, to talk about the turnstiles of the world, to talk about heavy music as it exists today in the current year of our Lord. But not until we get there. This is a process, my friend, as you know.
It'll be next year of our Lord, I think.
If we're lucky, we will see. But the journey has been the joy of this thing. So we will continue along the journey. We now have a TikTok channel. We have an Instagram page. We have a Spotify playlist dedicated to two Spotify playlists, actually, the History of Heavy podcast Spotify playlist and the weekly Heavy 5 playlist, which I haven't even really told you about yet, Dave. That's a thing that's happening on TikTok. Dave doesn't look at TikTok, so
wow, it's a big reveal right here on the show.
It's a big reveal. So all kinds of fun stuff happening on this wonderful hobby of ours that is the History of Heavy, that has been an absolute joy. But let's get into tonight's conversation. Tonight is a big one in the history of music. I am not sure that it is a big one in the history of heavy, but that's why I wanted to talk about this artist and this song. But we will not do that until we tee up the context that band sits in the year of 1971. And Dave, that means it is time for your Cultural Corner.
Dave's Cultural.
Ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's Cultural Corner, we'll be featuring a cursory deep dive into the phenomenon called Pink Floyd. Now, Wikipedia does a very good job of summarizing it, and it's hard to really summarize their exact place in music. It's very complex, but I think they did a really good job. So props to Wikipedia for this entry. But let me take you through it. So tonight we are doing One of These Days, which you're going to talk a little bit more about. But it's from Pink Floyd. And Pink Floyd is an English rock band formed in London, 1965, getting an early following as one of the first British psychedelic groups. They were distinguished by their extended compositions, sonic experiments, philosophical lyrics, and elaborate live performance, and became a leading prog rock band. Founded in 1965 by Syd Barrett on guitar and lead vocals, Nick Mason on drums, Roger Waters bass, guitar, and vocals, and Richard Wright keyboard and vocals. With Barrett as their main songwriter, they were one of the major bands of the psychedelic rock movement and achieved 2 hit singles with Arnold Lane and See Emily Play, and a successful debut album with The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, all of this in 1967. David Gilmour on guitar and vocals joined in 1967. Barrett left in 1968 due to deteriorating mental health. Following Barrett's departure, the 4 remaining members all contributed compositions, though Waters becomes the primary lyricist and thematic leader. After a period of musical experimentation with albums such as A Saucer Full of Secrets in 1968 and Meddle in 1971, that is where One of These Days is from. Pink Floyd, under Waters' direction and concepts, released their most successful albums, The Dark Side of the Moon in 73, Wish You Were Here in 1975, Animals 1977, and The Wall 1979. 1982 musical film based on The Wall won 2 BAFTAs, and Pink Floyd also composed several film scores. But it seems that every deep dive we get to the point that starts personal tensions. Personal tensions led to Wright leaving the band in 1981, followed by Waters in 1985. Gilmour and Mason continued as Pink Floyd, rejoined later by Wright. They produced 2 studio albums, A Momentary Lapse of Reason in 1987 and The Division Bell in 1994, with both being backed by major tours. In 2005, Gilmour, Mason, and Wright reunited with Waters for a performance at the Global Awareness event, Live 8. Barrett died in 2006, as did Wright in 2008. The last Pink Floyd studio album, The Endless River, in 2014, was based on unreleased material from the Division Bell recording sessions. In 2022, Gilmour and Mason reformed Pink Floyd to release the song Hey Hey Rise Up in protest of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, bringing us right into contemporary moments. By 2013, Pink Floyd had sold more than 250 million records worldwide, making them one of the best-selling music artists of all time. The Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall were inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame and are amongst the best-selling albums of all time. Pink Floyd albums topped the US Billboard 200 and 5 topped UK album charts. 4 Pink Floyd albums topped the US Billboard 200 and 5 topped the UK album charts. Although an album-oriented band, they did achieve several hit singles. Arnold Lane and See Emily Play, both aforementioned. Money, 1973, Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2. Not Now, John, On the Turning Away, and High Hopes. Pink Floyd were inducted into the US Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 and the UK Music Hall of Fame in 2005. In 2008, they were awarded the Polar Music Prize for their monumental contribution over the decades to the fusion of art and music in the development of popular culture. I think that sums it up right there.
It really does. The enormity of Pink Floyd is impressive and a bit baffling, and we will talk a lot about that. But tonight we are talking about Meddle. That is Meddle, not Medal, and certainly not Metal, given the context of the show. Meddle was Pink Floyd's 6th studio album and was released on November 5th, 1971 on Harvest Records. It is widely considered to be the album that fully transitioned the band from that Syd Barrett-inspired 60s psychedelic folk sound to a more progressive, Roger Waters-led 70s sound, which is most evident on the album's centerpiece and closing track, the 23-minute-long Echoes. The album was critically acclaimed upon release and reached number 3 on the UK album charts, but it underperformed in the US, where the band would not reach its Godhead tier status for 2 more years when they would release their 8th studio album, The Dark Side of the Moon, in 1973. Meddle would go gold that year in 1973 and would eventually reach double platinum status in 1994. Tonight, as Dave mentioned, we are talking about the album's lead track and its only single, One of These Days. The song is the album's lone instrumental, and features not one but two bass guitars. One played by Roger Waters, that is panned hard left. The other played by David Gilmour, that is panned hard right. Gilmour also plays, of course, the electric guitar and slide guitars on the track. Richard Wright plays Hammond organ and the piano, and of course, Nick Mason, as always, plays the drums. The song is a moody, progressive rock number with a high-energy propulsion, and other than some parts of echoes, plural, it really is the only song on Meddle that can even remotely be considered sonically heavy. But Dave, broadly speaking, do you consider Pink Floyd to be a heavy band? In the context of everything we've talked about relating to heavy across 33 episodes.
So I'm going to give you the short answer and the long answer because I like to do the long answer. The short answer is no. The long answer is, but they're important in the conversation, and they have this song which is heavy, and they have other songs that are heavy. Are they a heavy band? Actually, yes, but not in the way that we've been examining heavy. They're in one of the outer rings of how we've been examining heavy. I don't think you could find many heavier bands now that I'm thinking about it.
They are a heady band, Heady.
Yeah.
But
that's why that's where they're heavy and how they're heavy, because they're heady.
Right.
And consistently so. Like, it's not a phase that they went through as a part of an album journey. Like, that's how the band just evolved. That's the character of the band. That's the personality of the music. This song in particular has a real authentic heaviness to it, in that it takes a long time to build up, and then it's just full of tension. Right? There's like,
okay, wait. Hold your thoughts on the song
tension.
itself. Hold your thoughts on one of these days. I think you said it right. I think. Well, first, let me say, when I started compiling the list of songs that you then began to augment, of course, Pink Floyd I never even considered Pink Floyd. I will say up front that I deeply love Pink Floyd. I love all eras of Pink Floyd. Actually, I love all eras until through the final cut. After Roger Waters left the band, I don't have any interest in post Roger Waters Pink Floyd, but for the sake of this conversation, I never intended to include Pink Floyd in our discussion as it relates to heavy until a few months ago when I saw Pink Floyd at Pompeii, the concert film that they released in 1973, which was back in theaters this year. They released a 70 millimeter cut, and it's that movie is basically a concert film where they are playing in Pompeii, in this Roman Colosseum with no audience, and they are just playing songs basically from Meddle. It's right around this time, and then sort of cuts to some footage of them in the studio recording what would ultimately become Dark Side of the Moon. But seeing that and hearing One of These Days in the context of that movie, with some of the psychedelic imagery, with seeing them playing in this crumbled grand Colosseum, really had an impact on me and made me go, shit, man, if that's not heavy, I don't know what is. And then you said it a few minutes ago. I think as we continue to chronicle, capital H heavy, you can't talk about shoegaze and My Bloody Valentine, who we will get to. You cannot talk about a band like Blood Incantation, whom I love dearly, who I mentioned at the top, not intentionally, but you can't mention them without talking about Pink Floyd and the influence of Pink Floyd, how influential Pink Floyd was to what will later be undeniably heavy bands. So touching on their heaviness, their headiness, their approach to music, I think is really important in the conversation of heavy. And one of these days specifically is sonically heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to get back to what makes it heavy, I think is all this tension that it builds. And that's something that I hear in their music in general, is they have this ability to make it real slow and build tension and take a long time before there's a key change or the next note or the next phrase. A lot of space, but that really like keeps you on edge, and that gives it a certain weight that's heavy. It occupies a lot of space in your consciousness, in your awareness.
For sure. And the popularity of Pink Floyd that you touched on. In fact, when I was getting ready to come up to talk about it tonight, my wife Chaley said, "What are you guys doing tonight?" And I said, "Pink Floyd." And she and I talked for a couple of minutes about how much we both love Pink Floyd. She's like, "Oh, I love Pink Floyd, and I love Pink Floyd," because everybody loves Pink Floyd. And for as heady and heavy and bizarre and complicated and complex and and deep as their music is, it is crazy that they are as mega popular as they are. They're not like a friend. They didn't have like bouts of popularity. Like they are, you said it, they are one of the most successful bands in the history of rock music. And they've got 23-minute songs.
Right, right, right.
Like
That are conceptual, that are
yeah,
abstract. Like
heavy stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good observation. They don't have the right math to be successful. They don't have the right math to be this successful, and yet here they are, right?
Right. Yeah, and given their lineup change, you would think that the Sid Barrett version, which I also love, the sort of Piper at the Gates of Dawn and that era, while successful, didn't come close to the heights they would get to when they get to Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here on the Wall. Those records are way trippier sonically than the Sid Barrett stuff, which is certainly has its trippiness, but has more of a kind of a folky, melodic.
Yeah, thinking about the songs and some of the elements that they bring to their music is that they have a lot of space and a lot of like long drawn out notes, and so a lot of times the guitar solo-y work can be very approachable because it's not super noodly.
Yeah,
It has these long, clear expressions. And maybe that's one of the reasons that it appeals, because just thinking about Dark Side of the Moon, and of course, The Wall is a compelling story and narrative, and something that is very rock and roll DNA is the angst of adolescence, which is incorporated in that whole album. And so that just fits, right?
right.
Um, but yeah, they have this ability to connect and be as deep as they are and as heavy as they are. And that's interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned David Gilmour because he is you can't say over, underrated because he's one of the guys, right? But all of the kinds of guitar players that we've talked about in the context of these heavy conversations are really are kind of have been twofold. It's really kind of I guess three, right? You have the virtuosic kind of unique approach of a Jimi Hendrix and Robert Fripp of King Crimson. Then you have the kind of the riff heavy guys like Tony Iommi and the Kinks song and the Kingsmen and that stuff. And then you have the real virtuoso players who play the shredders that we will get to later when we get to some thrash metal and things. David Gilmour is really none of those. David Gilmour is a very classy, less is more, melody rules above all else. And I think he is one of the most elegant, beautiful guitar players ever. Like, he is never flashy. He always plays to the song. Almost all of his solos are singable, and the melody of the solo is memorable and an earworm. And the tone of his guitar is glass perfect. And he is, in all likelihood, one of the big reasons, that when he joins is when the momentum really begins and starts to build. And not to mention the fact that he's the lead vocal on, the song we're talking about tonight is an instrumental, but he sings lead vocal on every song on Meddle. And most of their big hits, Comfortably Numb, that's David Gilmour singing. Roger Waters sang some stuff, but it's primarily David Gilmour. Like, he's, because of the concept of The Wall and the Final Cut and Wish You Were Here and whatever is all attributed to Roger Waters, David Gilmour isn't necessarily talked necessarily as the creative force. He's talked about as kind of the guitar player, but his talent as both a guitar player and a singer, I think, are incredibly key to making this complex, really kind of crazy music approachable.
Yeah. Well put. The vocal quality, is absent from this track, but his vocals, his vocal style, his voice, really plays to it as another instrument. And you forget that people are singing and playing an instrument, and they're doing kind of separate things, which is,
Like, they're
drummers
two
do that
guys.
with both hands. Yeah. Drummers do that with, their hands and feet. Guitar players do that with different hands. Piano players, everybody, you can do that. But it still is impressive when you remember that that's what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And when like David Gilmour, you do both things exceptionally well,
Right.
it's incredibly impressive. There are plenty of singers who just happen to have a guitar strapped around their neck,
Right.
and plenty of guitar players that couldn't find a singer, so they lend their voice to the thing. But Gilmour does both really, he is kind of
Authentically.
exceeds expectations in both areas. What is your relationship to Pink Floyd? I'm not sure we've ever had a deep conversation about them.
It is more than cursory. I'm pretty familiar with Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall. A little bit Animals, but like, I haven't listened to them in years. I don't miss them per se.
Hmm.
But when I listened to some music for this episode, I remembered how much I remembered. Yeah, or I was reminded how much of a relationship I had had with some of the other music. It was very familiar. And like you said, the solos are kind of earworms and singable. And that's that's what I'm hearing in this song, although not as on display. This song has some other interesting elements, which I think is the tension that it builds.
Yeah.
Um, and the fact that there's no vocals, and that's a big part of the Pink Floyd sound.
Had you been familiar with this song? Do you know the Meddle record at all?
No, no, I
How
wasn't
did it
familiar
how
with
did
this.
it hit you?
It sounded like Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's really the best way I can put it. It sounded like Pink Floyd.
Yeah. It is a little nuts, again, going back to sort of the popularity and just how big this band is. This song So this is not a song you were familiar with.
No.
I don't know. I mean, this is the lead single, and the first track on the record. So it's not a deep cut by any means, but it's not a better known Pink Floyd song. Certainly by the populace, it's not. But again, using Spotify as our metric of understanding how well known or how listened to something is, one of these days has 54 million listens,
Oh, wow.
which
That's quite
which
a
is
bit.
which is quite a bit. Which is quite a bit. We and you put that into context. Let's see what's a good. Let's look at "Kick Out the Jams" by the MC5. "Kick Out the Jams," unquestionably, not even close, is the MC5's most popular, well-known song. It's got 22 million listens. And one of these days, again, not a deep cut, but a lesser, well-known Pink Floyd song has 54 million.
Jeez. More than twice.
Yeah, and again, they're a pretty challenging arty band to have the masses
Right?
accept them as, a kind of a pop band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just that aspect, that ability to make a connection uh, with a music that is typically exclusive, right? Like it's more exclusive than inclusive, or it's perceived that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it has the building blocks to be that way, but it doesn't manifest that way. It's very approachable.
Right, right. And, just to get back to the notion of heavy a little bit, last week when we talked about Janis Joplin, you used the word desperation to describe what makes Janis, and specifically the song "Move Over," heavy. It's a desperation, and we talked about things like "Kick Out the Jams," how anger or frustration provides the heavy, and with things like "Ascension" by John Coltrane, it's kind of the chaos that provides the heavy. I think where you have it with "One of These Days," maybe more than any song we've talked about so far, is the tension that you described. Is that tension and that thing that's boiling just below the surface, even when the song gets to full tilt, that full tilt is still kind of a boiling. It's still a kind of this rumbling heaviness that isn't this full explosion. It's kind of got this almost plodding nature that would become characteristic of straightforward heavy metal bands that would take kind of bits of Sabbath and kind of some of this kind of energy and become bands like Sleep or Electric Wizard, or
Right?
that you
Space Slug.
yeah, right. So I really like that about it, and I think even if you go back to the song Echoes, which I think is incredible, and again has some heavy parts in it, that song isn't necessarily sonically heavy, but I think, again, like a lot of their music, there's a tension and there's something going. There's a headiness to what's going on just beneath the surface that it makes the music heavy. And I think maybe one of the things that makes Pink Floyd so unique is they are at the same time a lean back and a lean forward band. Is that
Mm-hmm.
you can just chill and lay in your bath, or smoke your doobie, or hang out in a park, and Pink Floyd works perfectly well. But you can also put your headphones on and pay attention to every note and every lyric and every drum fill,
Every mood.
and there's something going on.
Yeah.
They're very smart, and they wear smart on their sleeve, which doesn't often carry emotion.
Well, and also it's a real fine line between confidence and arrogance, right?
Mm,
You feel that
yes.
they're on the line of confidence. they're doing what they're doing with an intentionality of craft. Like they've shaped this way on purpose, and it took a long time. Um, and that's part of what the weight is, right? Like it's this confident carry where you just expect um how do I say this? Now, and of course I'm going off of the persona of the music, right? I don't know
Right.
about the band members. I haven't don't have that close of a relationship, but it feels very earnest in a way that when that's applied to Pearl Jam, it bugs me.
We're always picking up Pearl Jam.
It's a good example of why of this phenomenon where I don't know, they're a fine band. They're all very talented. They make a hell of a song. They sell a shitload of records. I don't know. I just don't connect with them.
Yeah.
And but it's this quality of this earnestness about them that rubs me the wrong way. But I expect it with Pink Floyd, and it sits well. They wear it well. It seems like it's the same quality, though, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, yeah, yes. I think. Well, I'll say this about Pink Floyd, and I do think there's some commonalities with Pearl Jam, but with Pink Floyd, use the word craft. I think that's a really good word to use with Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd is a band where you can see the craft.
Yeah,
You can see how, or you can hear how much effort and talent and labor was put into making the thing just so.
right.
And usually for me, that will take me out of an emotional connection where I can kind of appreciate, like, oh, that's really good, but it doesn't hit me. Pink Floyd, time and again, hits me emotionally while I'm also aware of their keenly tuned craft, which
Yeah,
is not an easy thing to accomplish. And also, being British, it's like Oasis. My son went to see Oasis on Sunday, and they're the talk of the music industry, or they're the music conversation in recent months. And there's a smugness to their Britishness that, because they are British, is appealing and charming. Pink
yeah.
Floyd
It's
has that same
becoming.
thing. When you get that sort of smug, which I interpret as smugness from Americans like Pearl Jam, it just seems kind of douchey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's the same quality, but one band pulls it off and another one doesn't. Personally, and maybe somebody else ranks it opposite. Maybe somebody else doesn't see the conflict or doesn't agree with it.
Well,
But that's how it occurs to me.
also, and specific to the conversation about Pink Floyd, is there is really nobody else that sounds like Pink Floyd. You know,
Mm,
like, broadly speaking, you mentioned hearing David Gilmour's guitar and it being instantly identifiable.
mm,
That is,
mm.
or when you heard One of These Days, you're like, well, yeah, it sounds like Pink Floyd. Like,
It sounds like Pink Floyd. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, like and there's not a vocal on the song, but it's Pink
right,
Floyd.
right.
Pearl Jam, to use just the example we're talking about, Pearl Jam's borrowing from all over the place, and we've heard hundreds of bands that sound like Pearl Jam. So, and we love a lot of those bands, so it's not putting down that sound, but Pink Floyd is pretty singular.
Yes, very unique signature sound. Um, and it doesn't on paper it shouldn't connect the way it does, but it does. It just hits different, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, having that three dimensionality where you can see both personalities of this split person, right? You can see the technical talent, you can see the music theory part of it, but you can feel the emotional connection because they build up this emotion in the song. And I think a lot of that has to do with the tension and the way the tension gets broken through David Gilmour's like very soaring guitar. We talk about that with Rush, how Alex Lifeson can do these soaring guitar phrases on top of a bubble of bass and drums that's going on. And that kind of duality of having that tension and that floating over the tension. I love that paradox when I hear it with Rush, and I hear that a lot with Pink Floyd, is this paradox of having this tension broken or smoothed over by this long guitar line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good description. They're I still listen to them all the time. I love them. And again, all pretty much all phases of their catalog I think is really great. There's a lot of just incredible stuff in there. And it Pink Floyd is a mood, but I think it does span some moods. And One of These Days is a good example of that, where it does have a little bit of another texture and certainly some heaviness. And I just felt like it was important that we plant this flag, because we will return to Pink Floyd as an influence as we get further down our line, talking about other bands that are heavy, that are borrowing things that Pink Floyd kind of began in the late '60s, and then through the '80s.
And here we have them on 1971.
We do. Anything else you wanted to say about One of These Days?
No, it was an interesting song to get to know and an interesting part of the band I hadn't learned about. And it gave me an excuse to remember that there is a part of Pink Floyd that I do have a relationship with.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that sort of this period when, Uma Guma and Adam Hart Mother and Meddle and Move, before you get to Dark Side and Wish You Were Here, that and sort of the kind of, as Sid is being phased out, but before they reach mega stardom, those kind of in between records, which were all very successful records, but all of those records are fucking great. Like dig into those records, because there's so much cool shit in there that you may not have discovered just because you're so familiar with all the other ones.
right. Yeah, that's great. It's a good excuse. Yeah, I love these exercises that lead me onto scavenger hunts.
Yeah, yeah, good. Two film recommendations as a result of this conversation. I had mentioned Live at Pompeii. Anybody remotely interested in Pink Floyd or even concert films should watch that, because it is really, really great. And then the next one is a movie called about Hipgnosis, the art studio design, graphic design studio Hipgnosis. The movie is called Squaring the Circle: The Story of Hipgnosis. Hipgnosis, for those of you that don't know, you do know. They created hundreds and hundreds of album covers that you are familiar with, including almost every Pink Floyd album. This record, Dark Side of the Moon, Wish You Were Here, Adam Hart Mother, on and on and on. Also, to bring Sabbath into the conversation, Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die were done by Hipgnosis. Things like the Scorpions' Blackout and Animal Magnetism were done by Hipgnosis. House is the Holy by Led Zeppelin. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of albums that immediately were created by these people. And the documentary about them is fascinating. So recommend people check that out. But before we go, at least for the sake of ceremony, we have to jump into Song v Song, where we pit our current song champion against the current episode's contender. Our champions are, mine is Loose by the Stooges. Dave's is Kingdom Come by Sir Lord Baltimore. Those songs have done pretty well. Mine is way back from episode 22. Dave's is from episode 28. We are at episode 34. Dave, how is Pink Floyd going to do against Kingdom Come?
Kingdom Come is still my champion.
Okay.
I was really so tickled when I found that band.
Yeah, that was Kingdom, or Sir Lord Baltimore was a good discovery, and I'm
Yeah.
glad you dug in so deeply. That is a great song and a good album that I've actually gone back to a few times. Hadn't heard that band in years, and you kind of resparked the interest, which is great.
Yeah, and a bunch of those songs are showing up on other playlists, and it's leading me down these other like 70s kind of fuzzbox bass holes that are just I love about
I'm so obsessed with
algorithms.
70s music, broadly speaking. And we've got a lot of it to come. We're only in 1971, and we've got a huge one next week that will definitely be a good contender for our current champions. I am keeping Loose by the Stooges as well, by the way. Love Pink Floyd, love this song. In the conversation of heavy, Stooges all day. Next week's going to be a good challenger, though. Next week, we continue in 1971 with The Who. We are going to talk about Won't Get Fooled Again, which is a mega song and one of many that we could have chosen by The Who. But of course, you can't have a conversation about heavy without touching on The Who at some point. So we will do that next week.
Looking forward to that.
So am I. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Stay heavy.
Okay, thank you. Bye.